Hi everyone, my name is Zaid Elwi and I'm one of the facilitators in the Explore program that you all started this week.
And hi everybody, I am Marta Fornos and I will be helping out on today's call in case we're facing any issues. Nice to meet you all.
So over the next 9 weeks, this program will challenge you to think critically about the role you can play in your community and in the world. Before you think about the impact you want to have, you need to start by answering one important question. Who are you? This sounds easy enough, but it's actually very complicated. A lot of us hold self-beliefs that limit our potential. We don't apply for a job we want because we think we're bad at interviews. We don't submit our writing to the poetry contest because we think we lack talent. We don't even start our journeys towards building a better future for ourselves because we don't truly know who we are and what we're capable of accomplishing. That is why for today's class, we wanted to hear from someone who has gone through a journey of self-exploration and reinvention in order to build a better future for themselves while also giving back to their community. Over the next 30 minutes, we will be talking to Boliko Edjidjimo, who is the co-founder of a commerce agency specializing in online store design, retail experience, digital marketing called Sunday Brunch. His personal story is inspiring because he developed an entrepreneur mindset and taught himself how to run a business. You all received his bio before class, so let's jump into the interview and learn more about their journey and what they do today. So, hello, Boliko. Thank you for joining us today. As our first question, we want to ask you, what did you want to become when you were 8 years old?
Hi, I'm glad to be here and thank you for having me. When I was growing up, I had, I guess, two things I wanted to be when I grew up. So when I was much younger, I wanted to be Batman. I think that was part of something that stuck was just, wanting to help people, but also be cool, have a bunch of gadgets. And then later on, I wanted to be a pilot really bad. So that actually led me to joining the Air Cadets later on. And I actually did get to fly for a bit. I unfortunately don't have my license because it was a competitive process. And I joined too late to participate, but I still got to do a lot of flying, both gliding and powered flight. And it's something that I'll probably do privately in the future.
That's nice. That's nice. So for our question, our second question, so did you have any role models growing up, and can you describe their influence on you, and why do you consider them to be your role models? What is something you learned from them that you live by?
That's a good question, and I want to just pick apart the term role model for a second. So for me, I'd say, to be honest, when I was younger, I didn't really have role models necessarily, because at the time, I didn't even know who I was or who I wanted to be. So it was hard to kind of look up to anybody specific. I think that as I got older and started to know which direction I wanted to go in, that's when I started to identify certain traits in people. So I didn't have a specific person that, let's say, I looked up to, but I admired certain things that they've done, right? Just because at the end of the day, people are people, they're multifaceted, they have their flaws, they have their good parts. So I really try and find the best in everybody. And a lot of the people that I do look up to are some of my friends, for example, just people in my periphery. So for example, there's somebody I played rugby with in high school. We reconnected here in Montreal, and I found out that he started a brand, and he did that completely on his own. He's built an online community and was able to get he was able to also get a lot of celebrity endorsement very quickly. So one of the other people as well was somebody I met through my previous role, was who also had their own agency. They had been in marketing their whole life and really started their real career, their real passion at retirement, right? So I got to learn a lot from her and just get her perspective on things, which was, you want to think about your happiness as early as possible. Making money is great, but she did all of that and hated her life and ended up, finding her real path and real calling much later on in her life. So I think there's a bunch of people like that in my life where they have inspiring stories or things that they've done. Just this morning, I was actually on TikTok and I saw that Lil Nas X has been sharing, his journey and how he got to where he is. And it was really eye-opening to see how much was accomplished just in 1 year, and how he literally had nothing and built up, and how he got Old Town Road to where it was now. So I think, it can be celebrities, it can be people in my life a lot of the times, but there's a bunch of people that I like to be inspired by their stories and learn as much as I can from them.
That's very true. Everyone has their story, and you can learn something from everyone. Why is it important? Why do you think, like for you, Boliko, why do you think community work is important and impact in your community, doing impact in your community is important? We can talk about in relation to your role as a social impact manager at Shopify.
Yeah. So I think for me, when it comes to community, a lot of the times you've probably heard the term self-care, right? So you're feeling depressed, you're going through things, self-care, which has often been, I'd say, commoditized to focus on just buying yourself things until you feel better. Another aspect of self-care that's not talked about is community care. So community care is really just caring for the community, and it cares back for you. Either directly or indirectly. So by helping people, you're helping yourself as well. So the best way to learn is to teach. In terms of community, you want to be the change that you want to see in your community. So I think that being involved and being aware of what's going on will help you in the long term. So yes, you're doing it for the community, but it's also just great for you to know what's going on, right? So a lot of the things I've done in the past. So when I was a social impact manager, I focused a lot of my efforts on the Black community, specifically Black community in tech and entrepreneurship, because I was somebody who was Black and didn't see a lot of people like me, especially when I got hired at Shopify. I went to Toronto and visited the offices there, tons of Black folks in tech. I came back to Montreal and I couldn't find, 2 Black developers who knew each other. There were folks, but they were very spread out and there weren't a lot of us. And I wanted to fix that. So I built my own community. This was even outside, I'd say, of the realm of my job because I paid for most of the stuff myself. But I started my own community of meetups and it got pretty big. So now I actually have, in the end, had people from other tech companies such as Airbnb, Uber, all join me here in Montreal where we had different events. Some were focused primarily on, skilling up and getting into tech, and others were talking about broader problems. So the intersection of mental health between Black folks and tech, because tech is an industry that's extremely hard on mental health, and Black folks, the Black community has a lot of trouble with when it comes to mental health and the stigma around it. So we had that conversation, I believe, as well, to kind of contrast the conversations we had about creating Black wealth. So I'd say that to me, in terms of the community impact and getting into involved in the community is just something that is not only good for the community around you because you are part of that community, but it's good for yourself. It helps you grow, it helps you feel better, and there's a certain level of pride that you get when it comes to giving back and being involved as well.
So for our first question, what do you wish you had known when you were 15 years old?
Yeah, so one of that's a good question. So what did I wish I knew when I was 15? I think that there's 2 things. You don't know what path people took to success. So a lot of the times we see people, it's like, oh, wow, like they have a cool job, they have a cool car, like, they must have worked really hard, etc. And in most cases, it's true, but there's often things that people don't talk about when it comes to success, right? So a lot of companies exist or people are successful because they literally were at the right place at the right time. There's no easier way to put that. So sometimes we look at somebody's success and we get jealous, we get envious, we look up to them, but they got lucky. It's as simple as that. Other times, they got support that they didn't mention, right? So a lot of people in tech, especially what we call the first round of funding to start your business, the friends and family round. So people will go to their aunts, their uncles, their parents, and they'll just give them, $5,000 here and there. And then they've amassed, their first 100,000 to start the business. Unfortunately, not everybody has family with that kind of disposable income, but it's not something that's discussed, right? Most investors often won't even talk to you until you've raised that kind of friends and family round, which for a lot of people is impossible. So I'd say that when I was the advice would be to think critically of what success means, right? So, not just take what's presented at the surface level, because there's always more to the story, and also to pace yourself, right? So I remember when I moved here, I went to speak to a friend who was a VP at a tech company, and I was freaking out because I'm like, oh my God, I'm still in school. I'm not sure when I'm going to graduate. I don't, I'm not working in a big tech company, blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm not climbing the ladders. What am I going to do? And he asked me how old I was, and I told him at the time I was 22, and he laughed in my face and told me to shut up, and that I was making him feel old, and to just kind of slow down, because he was much older than me, and he told me that, yeah, like, he didn't start his career really until he was 32. There are people I know who didn't start their real career until they're 40. I believe the average age of an entrepreneur, especially successful entrepreneur, is in their mid 40s. So it's really to think that, along the way, to pace yourself, just because you're going to learn along the way. Something might stick and you might succeed earlier than expected, but it's really to just slow down, pace yourself, and remember that it's a marathon, not a sprint.
That's very true. That's very true. We have another question regarding your company. So I see that you have founded Sunday Brunch. That's cool. So how did you get this idea?
So it's a funny story. So one of my mentors, she gave me an exercise when I told her I wanted to start an agency, but I didn't really know which direction to take it. She told me to ask myself 3 questions, which was, who am I? What did I want to, what did I want to do, and why should people care? So when I did all of that exercise, one of the big things that I realized was I wanted to be happy. It sounds cheesy, but that was really the focus. Like, I want to do something that I genuinely enjoy. And what I enjoyed was a couple of different things, right? And so I was like, how can I combine that? So I love food. I love to cook. A lot of people who know me know that, why aren't you opening a restaurant? Why aren't you a chef? Like, I have my reasons, but I've always wanted to pursue that aspect of my life. But in terms of my other interests, I love small businesses. I love working with people. I spent one of my birthdays 2 years ago, actually, is one of the few times I took time off, was to work a pop-up shop. My friend was having a pop-up during Euro Festival, and I volunteered to work there with him during my birthday, just because that's what I was passionate about. That's what I wanted to do, spend time with some friends, do something cool, meet a lot of people. I think that was great, and I wanted to combine all of that. And the last aspect was just doing different things. Like, I'm somebody who likes challenges, who likes to work on different projects, doing the same thing every day. Eventually, I get kind of bored. So this was a combination of all of that. So Sunday Brunch is really an agency that helps brands, businesses that want to get online, but also do a bit of offline stuff as well. So merchandising, how to set up your pop-up store, your point of sale system, all that stuff. But it was really a combination of everything. And the food aspect comes into it because I've really themed my business around food. So a lot of my branding is like menu based. So that's how my services are presented. That's what I send to people. And even right now, my blog is kind of making fun of the way recipes, every time you try to look up a recipe, there's a huge blog post of somebody's life story that you have to scroll through just to find out how to make brownies. So I kind of made fun of that. So my blog for my agency is the reverse. So I'm actually sharing recipes that I've developed, and they're going up at the top, and then the blog post is at the bottom. So it's a fun way to kind of share my passion around food, but also from a technical perspective, recipes do very well when it comes to search engine optimization. And I've done some research to show that a lot of people who do cook and are very do-it-yourself are often entrepreneurs who would probably use my services. So it's a fun way for me to just be creative and explore my culinary side, but I'm also doing a bit of growth hacking and marketing at the same time.
That's very cool. That's very cool. So we want to talk about failure, and what do you tell young people about failure? What do you have to tell them about that, and why do you think it's important to learn from failure? Like, what do we learn from failures?
Yeah, so most people who are on a successful venture, it's often not their first. To give you a good example, there's actually somebody I know here in Montreal. They were even younger than me. They started a company. They had a very successful Kickstarter. Everything was going well. They were all over the media. Everybody loved them. But then things didn't work out and the company completely crashed and burned. But what was still there was them. So they had this a certain skill set, and they also gained experience from that journey, and they used that to do other things. So one of them, for example, he actually went on after that to start another company, which just last year raised $1.5 million. So somebody before 25 raising $1.5 million. That's incredible. And that's off of a failure, right? So he took what he learned and applied it right away. So I think failure to me, especially when you're thinking about entrepreneurship, is just experience, right? So every time you fail, it's not that you shouldn't punish yourself or look at it as a bad thing. Obviously, you want to avoid failure, but if it happens, you use that as a learning opportunity. So what could I have done differently? What was not in my control? Because sometimes failure occurs and it's not your fault. There are always external factors that are outside of your control. So making sure you're aware of that is important, not just for your future success, but also for your mental health, because it's extremely easy to punish yourself when you fail, but it's not always your fault, right? So it can be just your physical health, it can be your mental health, it can be, again, societal factors, because there are barriers to entrepreneurship for various groups, and they vary greatly depending on which groups you're part of. So I'd say that it's important to just to be aware of those factors, but also to learn from what you can control. So anything you can control, what could I have done differently? What will I change next time? And making sure that you keep track of that.
That's true. That's very true. Failure is part of the journey. So as a final question before we open up to the audience, is there a piece of advice that you'd like to share with the students to best prepare them for the future, and what would it be?
I would say make a lot of friends and listen to people. It's been really fun to see that, like, everywhere I've gotten, honestly, I have somebody to thank, right? So when I moved to Montreal, I was still a student and I actually didn't have a job, and I complained about it on Tumblr. And I actually had a friend who also went to the same university as me, who was on Tumblr as well. And he messaged me, he's like, "Hey, do you want a job?" And I said, "Sure." And he brought me out to the Frank and Oak office, and I worked there for a bit. Even that, when I started my agency and my job at Shopify, I got that through somebody I went to university with. Wasn't friends with them there, but we stayed in touch through social media. And one day he's just like, "Hey, I see what you talk about often. I see you're very passionate about social impact." Even though he didn't know me that well, he saw that, and when there was a job opening, he sent it to me right away. Even right now, a lot of the things I do often, right? I needed a graphic designer. I have a friend that does that. I need a lawyer. I have people like that in my life. So I'd say you never know where people are going to end up. And even if they don't do something that that is relevant to what you need, quote unquote, they might be able to support you just, again, as a friend emotionally. So I'd say make a lot of friends, help each other out, pay attention to what people are doing. And if you can help, right? So sometimes it's as simple as somebody is starting a business and they have a Twitter account, and just like retweeting what they tweeted and sharing their thing. Maybe it's buying from them, right? And sometimes I see somebody launch a business, I'll always buy it. Even if it's bad, right? If it's bad and I didn't like it, I'll give them that feedback, which is also very valuable. But I always try and support people either by purchasing their products or services, by offering my help if I can. And sometimes it's more passive, where it's just, sharing their content to help promote their brand or business.
So yeah, Marta is here.
Yeah, hi. First of all, can you hear me okay in the classroom? Yeah, okay, perfect. Okay, so now we're gonna move on to the Q&A section. So to start with, I would like to bring up a question that we had from one of the students here in the class today. And the question is, what do you do for volunteer work?
That's a good question. So I'd say due to the pandemic, I slowed down when it comes to volunteering. It's been a bit more difficult. One of the things I do, obviously, is like right now is mentoring. So classroom talks like this, a lot of coaching as well. I'm actually in the process of developing a course. So in the process of starting my agency, I did a lot of this learning when it comes to e-commerce development. It's something that I've always done, especially because I worked at Shopify, but I actually explored all the different ways. I took a bunch of online classes and I realized that there were certain gaps. So I actually ended up developing a course, which I'll be delivering in March for the Black Youth Network. So that's another way that I'm giving back. And I'm always often just coaching people as well. So if people need advice on their business, they have an idea, my inboxes are always open, and that's what I do. But previously, I hosted a lot of events for the Black community and specifically the Black community tech, but also just different marginalized groups as well. So the LGBTQ plus community as well. In Montreal, I hosted a lot of events when it comes to tech on entrepreneurship. And I volunteer my time often just helping people who can't afford to have employees yet, basically. So if they need a social media manager or somebody to help them up at the store, I just kind of volunteer sometimes, especially if it's a friend.
Okay, thank you very much. So maybe we can take a pause here and see if there's anybody in the classroom that has any other questions. No questions? Okay, then I can keep on going a little bit, or
I think Luis is just coming to unmute and gonna let us know.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute.
No problem.
Anybody have any questions? Well, I think there are none.
Okay. Okay, so then Boliko, just as a follow-up from the question that we had from the students about the volunteer work, you mentioned mentoring, and I think maybe we can take 1 minute to talk a little bit about mentorship. I think it's very important. So I would like to know from your perspective how, I don't know, what would be the happy path, right? Like if any of the people that is here today listening to us, what is a little bit mentoring? Who can you go look up for mentorship or not? What would be the benefits out of it? And what does it mean? Because I know it's a little bit different than coaching. So, if anybody was wondering here, if they can get started in, having a mentor, having maybe not a role model, but somebody that can accompany in a little bit of the journey.
Yeah. That's a good question. So I think when it comes to mentorship, a lot of the misconception is that it's transactional, in the sense that you have somebody who is more established and they teach you everything and elevate you. When in reality, it's more of a relationship, right? So in most cases, it's a friendship. So I'd say if there's somebody that you look up to and admire, find a way to connect with them, right? So if it's social media, and honestly, social media is the best way to connect with people. I cannot stress that enough. There are people who, with the blue check marks, you can just reply to them on Instagram and they read that and they don't have to reply. But it's been cases where I've had some great conversations with some pretty well-established people just through social media because it was way more casual and approachable. So I would say start there with a conversation, find the common ground, and then from there, it's asking questions, right? So asking questions is the best way because that gives them a prompt. Because if you say like, hey, I need help, it's a bit too broad. And when you're asking them specifically, hey, I want to break into the music business. I make music. I see that you make music and you've had success. How did you take care of your recording, right? So it's not just like music business specifically. It's like, I want to record my first album. How did you do that? Or I recorded my album. How did you promote it? Most of the times people are really happy to share that. A lot of people want to give back. A lot of people are comfortable with that. So I would say it's that. And on the flip side, it's also figuring out how you can help them, right? So for example, I have my mentor who, I was starting my agency. She helped me a lot, but she was in the process of starting her business. And she said, hey, by the way, since you're dealing with small businesses and especially in the retail space, the business I'm going into now is retail renovation. So if anybody needs those services, but are you able to refer them, right? So it was simple, just it was a simple ask, but it was something that allowed me to provide value as well. So it wasn't just a one-way street, and that way, in the long term, they want to help out. And if I look back at one of my first instances where I had a bit of a mentorship relationship was when I worked for Bloomberg, which is financial services, financial news agency based out of New York, but they're worldwide. So they had a rep come down from New York. He was an ex Wall Street guy, and at the time I was studying finance and really wanted to end up there. So I did what every business student did. I grabbed his business card, I emailed him, but instead of emailing him straight about business, I remember at the event, we all went afterwards for drinks. He was talking about soccer, so I actually started talking about soccer. I'm like, hey, did you watch the game? And he responded back. So we started talking about soccer. We started talking about stocks, just casually, like, hey, I'm investing in this. What do you think? And he'll be like, that's garbage. Here's what I would do instead. And from that relationship, there's just a lot of mutual respect that was gained. When it came time that Bloomberg was hiring, a lot of us applied and we didn't even get a response. And so I just sent him an email being like, hey, I applied for his job. Nobody heard back. Like, is there anything you can do to help? Like, can you help me with my resume or something? And he's like, I'll do you one better. You have an interview next week. Like, end of story. He's just like, because of the relationship we had, even we were talking casually, but along the way, he knew everything about me. He knew my work habits. He knew what I was passionate about. He knew my skill set, and he also knew what my career goals were. So when an opportunity arose, he was more than happy to do what he could to support it, because he wasn't taking a risk on somebody, again, like that he didn't know. He actually knew me. And so I'd say taking the time to build that relationship, just making friends with people is the best way to go around about mentorship.
Yeah, I agree. I agree a lot with all that. With all that
question, Marta. Can I?
Yeah.
Yeah. Boliko, one of in the Youth Explore program, the students right now are exploring who they are. They're asking the question, who am I? Which is, a very hard question, when we all know that throughout our lives, that's going to change. And they're reflecting on their character values and their traits, What do you think, what do you think the self-reflection has played a role in your life as you have moved through all of this, through your journey and your experiences with entrepreneurship and trying to pursue social impact, initiatives and all of that? What do you think the role of self-reflection has been for you?
I'd say self-reflection has just been my guide, essentially, in terms of how I navigate my next steps in my whole life, actually. So one of the exercises I do personally every 2 to 3 years, roughly, is sit down and ask myself, like, am I happy in every aspect of my life, right? So it's career, it's family, love life, everything. It's like, where I'm like, at this point right now, am I happy? And if the answer is yes, that's it, right? If it's no, it's like, what can I do to be happy? So for example, I was studying finance and I thought that's what I wanted to be. I thought I was going to be a Wall Street banker making lots of money. And then I realized I really did not like the environment of a bunch of loud dudes who thought they would rule the world, right? It didn't sit right with me. I knew I wanted to give back, and it just didn't mesh with a lot of my core values. So I left that. I ended up in tech by accident. And once I was in tech, I was like, okay, I'm not a programmer. I used to code back when I was much, much younger. I still have a bit of that, but I don't want to be a programmer. What else can I do? So I had to ask myself those questions, which led me into more marketing and growth trajectory. And for the social impact role, again, it was like, okay, what do I want to do? I was working a job already at a pretty successful, like a company that was doing very well. I had secured a position as head of support. We had just raised another round of money. So I had every incentive to stay there and continue to grow. but at the end of the day, again, I was not happy. So I asked myself, okay, what would I be happy with? And I started looking at different jobs, and that's when my friend proposed the community role at Shopify. And even when it came to Shopify, unfortunately, I was laid off due to COVID in August, but even before then, I was already thinking of leaving just because as great as the role was and the company, it just wasn't what I wanted to do anymore. I was getting kind of bored in a role where I was just mostly doing a lot of emails and paperwork. I wasn't seeing the kind of career growth I wanted to, because in my mind, if you're not growing, it's not healthy. And growth comes in different ways, right? It doesn't mean always moving forward. Sometimes you're moving sideways, as I like to say. So, it's a different career path. It's going back to school. It's starting a completely new program. That's completely okay as long as you're moving, right? You want to be moving, you want to be dynamic, and the best way to do that is to always check yourself and have that self-reflection.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, on this topic, I would like to mention that while reviewing your biography, it also caught our attention, this sentence that you just mentioned now about, let me find it. Yeah, sometimes moving sideways to a parallel path, still moving forward. We actually wrote it down. I 200% agree with what you're saying. So I would like maybe for you to talk a little bit about what does that mean, and maybe related to this career change that you were mentioning, right? Like a moment where you're not really happy with what you're doing. And that fear of like, okay, should I stop this career path just because maybe, like sometimes it's an easy way just to keep on going. And then, this fear of change, but knowing that you can still move forward by moving sideways, right? It's an important point.
I think it's like, for me, it started with school. So completely honest, I was not a great student, especially towards the end. I started off as a very good student. I had good grades, but towards the end of high school, I had a very hard time. I almost barely graduated and barely got into university. And even when I got to university, I got way too involved in extracurriculars like playing rugby and being part of different business clubs. So I completely flunked my classes. And when I switched schools and came here at Concordia, the same thing happened again. And I was very lucky to have a guidance counselor who was honest. And he was like, listen, by looking at your resume, by talking to you, I know that you're very bright, but it's not coming out in your work. So you can continue down this path and get the degree, but is this what you want to do? It's not. If so, you need to commit 100% to that and really put the effort behind it. Right now, you're not putting the effort. It really seems like something's pulling you in a different direction. If that's the direction you want to take, you should take it. But if you keep down this path, and you're not putting in the effort, you do realize the school's going to keep taking your money, regardless of whether you pass your classes or not. And so that was at that moment I decided not to finish that program and just continue with my career. And it was something that was very difficult. I'd say my parents had a very hard time understanding it, still do. And it's not to say that I'm anti-education. It's far from the opposite. All I do is take online classes and continue to learn. I'm actually been debating going back for a certificate or actually a degree in education to help with my work, because I find that education is the best way to sell and help people. Yeah, I would say that when it comes to that moving parallel, sometimes you need that push, and so I'm just trying to regain my train of thought. It's not always easy, and sometimes you take you move down a parallel path or another direction, and it ends up at a dead end, right? So at one point I started a business with my friends, everything was going well, but then we got to a point where we just knew it wasn't going to move forward, right? So I think it's important to just know, and that's why I was talking about school, is just know when this path isn't working out, right? So it's great to keep taking different opportunities, and sometimes you can explore different things in parallel, right? So, you know, you're still in school or you're working, having something on the side is a great way to test things out before you're ready to commit. Before I was kind of forced to start this agency because I didn't have a job. I was doing stuff on the side, right? So I was already setting the groundwork. So that's why when I did leave Shopify, I was more prepared than I was going to be, because I'd already started setting things up. I had already started learning what I needed to learn and making the connections. So by the time I actually started, I was getting referrals. I haven't even started any of my marketing, and I got two paid clients in a week, just from word of mouth, because people knew what I was doing and wanted my services. So I would say that as you're exploring these different paths, as you're moving, you know, forward or parallels, having that self-reflection and knowing when it's just not working out, because a lot of the times it won't, and it's important to know that so you can pivot and try something else. But it's also never too late, I'd say. So as important as it is to pivot, like don't worry if you took longer than you wanted to. Like, you know, I wanted to quit over a year ago. And I didn't, because I kept telling myself, oh yeah, there's a bit more to learn. There's a bit more to do. Maybe I'll earn a bit more money. And, you know, in some cases I did learn a bit more. So I was glad I stayed the extra time. But at the same time, I knew that I missed on certain opportunities because I hadn't started. So there's give and take there. And I'd say that it's important to just have the honest conversation with yourself and be okay with the fact that, you know, there's never a right time, but you should know when to quit and change directions.
Yeah, I agree. So then, excuse me. So on that note, talking about self-belief and limiting, so what do you have to overcome on this, like self-belief, in order to get where you are today, right?
So I'd say that for me, it's I had a lot of self-doubt. It's something that I've had to deal with for a long time, right? So I went from being, you know, quote unquote gifted kid with perfect grades to barely finishing high school. And so I didn't believe in myself. And, you know, to this day, I still don't sometimes. And it's hard, especially when you're starting a business. You need to believe in yourself, or else people won't believe in you and pay you for your services or buy your product. So I think that that's been the biggest thing that I've been working on, and I'm still working on, is being able to accept that. And part of that is, again, making sure I'm not comparing myself to others too much, because that was a big thing. I was like, okay, am I technical enough? Am I doing enough to start an agency, right? Like, I'm not a programmer, etc. And then I saw what other people and how much they were doing and how much they were charging. And I was like, wait, I can do that. I can do that. Why am I beating myself up? So I think that's been the biggest challenge. It's really a lot of that self-doubt. We talk about imposter syndrome, which is complicated, because I know that recently, it's something I learned, is that imposter syndrome does exist, but sometimes, especially if you're, you know, you are from a different racial background. So if you're not white, if you're not straight, if you're a woman, there are certain systemic barriers that make it so you don't feel like you belong. So it's one thing to feel that yourself, but sometimes there are spaces where they kind of don't want you, and there's things pushing against you. And that was something I had to learn too. It's like, how do you navigate that, right? So the space I'm in right now, for example, is heavily dominated by straight white men. And a lot of them, you know, it's like they're super successful. And then you could look under the hood and you're like, wait, how are they successful again? Like, what did they do? Like, there's nothing there, but they are where they are. And it makes you doubt yourself, because like, I've been working really hard. How come I'm not where they are? And then you start to realize, okay, there are a lot of factors where, you know, it's a boys club where they all support each other and they don't really support any outsiders. And, you know, that's unfair. And it shouldn't be that way. It's like, what can I do to combat that, right? So, for example, with my agency, I actually got reached out by one of my former colleagues who I barely worked with. He worked out of the LA office. But once he saw what I was doing, he runs a LinkedIn group for Black entrepreneurs and started sending people my way. And that really helped validate what I was doing and got me a lot of clients and especially paid clients. And the rest was just friends and acquaintances as well. So I would say that that self-doubt is definitely something that we all deal with. Imposter syndrome is real, and sometimes it's not imposter syndrome. Sometimes there are just spaces that don't want you there, but it doesn't mean you don't belong there. You can still fight your way to get in there. And one of the things with Sunday Brunch is I use food as my metaphors, and I mentioned having a seat at the table. I created Sunday Brunch to have a table that can bring other people. I didn't want to work for another agency and change it from the inside. I didn't want to do that ever again. I knew that I wanted to build something that I was proud of, that other people would feel comfortable working for this company and working with the company. So that's what I set out to do, and slowly, and I'm still working on it, trying to find that confidence to continue to do this as well.
Okay. So thank you for listening, and thank you, Boliko, for sharing your experience with us. That was very eye-opening. We hope you're all inspired by Boliko and his journey. Personally, my biggest takeaway is that I look up for his journey, for his entrepreneurship mindset, for building up his own business. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. Now, after today's session, make sure to log into your Google Classroom homework, because we want to get your feedback. It will only take 5 minutes, and it will help us make these sessions better for the future. Thank you very much, and you all have a good day. Thank you.